Let's jump right into this explainer and decode a notoriously tricky biology question by treating it, well, like a logic puzzle. Today, we're looking at question 139, which digs into the foundational work of Gregor Mendel. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by these multi-layered science questions, don't worry. We're going to break this down step by step and turn what looks like a boring, static question into a highly dynamic investigation. So we've got a classic assertion reason challenge on our hands, and I want to see if you can crack the case before I reveal the final verdict. These kinds of questions, they are totally legendary for tripping people up. They don't just ask you to spit out a memorized fact. They demand that you really understand the relationship between two entirely different statements. You've got to know exactly why something happened, not just what happened. So let's lay out the pieces of our puzzle. I want you to formulate your own hypothesis as we go. Ready? Okay, here are our two puzzle pieces. First, we have assertion A, which states that Mendel observed his F1 progeny plants were all tall and none were dwarf. Then we have reason R, stating that stem height is a contrasting trait, with tall being dominant and dwarf being recessive. Right now, they probably just sound like two independent, very scientific sentences. But our job today is to figure out if they're factually true, and honestly, more importantly, how they connect. Are they just existing next to each other by coincidence, or is there a deep causal link there? Let's build our case by zeroing in on assertion A first. This is all about Mendel's actual physical observation of that first generation of pea plants. And what he saw was pretty wild. In that first generation, the F1 progeny, literally all of the plants were tall. Notice this massive, undeniable 100-0 split. Think about it. Mendel crossbred thousands of these plants over years, probably expecting, a medium-sized hybrid or maybe a 50-50 mix. But instead, the dwarf trait just seemingly vanishes into thin air. It's a massive biological mystery begging for an explanation. Where on earth did it go? Well, to answer that, let's examine our second clue, reason R. This introduces the hidden genetic mechanics happening right behind the scenes. The crucial thing here is really grasping how these mechanics work. Stem height isn't just random, it operates on a super strict hierarchy. Tall acts as the dominant trait, literally overriding the dwarf recessive trait. Basically, if the dominant genetic instruction is in the mix, it takes over, making the plant tall. That recessive dwarf instruction, it's actually still sitting there in the background, but it's completely masked by the overpowering presence of the tall gene. These are the invisible rules dictating exactly what we see on the surface. All right, so to crack the specific test question, we need to run through a quick 3-step deductive checklist. Step 1, is assertion A factually true all on its own? Step 2, is reason R scientifically accurate by itself? If they both pass, we hit the final critical test. Step 3, does reason R perfectly and logically explain assertion A? Let's put our clues to the test. Running through steps 1 and 2, yep, the facts absolutely check out. Mendel really did observe that 100% tall F1 progeny, and tall is, without a doubt, scientifically dominant over dwarf. So assertion A is historically accurate, and reason R is a fundamental law of genetics. We've got two statements that are completely true on their own. The stage is perfectly set for the final showdown. Now for the most important part of our whole analysis. Does the dominance of the tall trait actually explain why there were 0 dwarf plants in that first generation? We have to connect the what to the why. We know the F1 generation inherited genetics from both a tall parent and a dwarf parent. So the million-dollar question is, does the rule laid out in reason R as the biological engine that produced that 100% tall outcome described in assertion A? What's really fascinating, actually it's kind of beautiful, is realizing that yes, reason R is the exact mechanical engine driving assertion A. Because the F1 plants inherit a tall gene from one parent and a dwarf gene from the other, they've got a mixed genetic makeup. Now, if the traits just blended together, we'd see medium plants. But because the tall trait actively dominates, the physical result absolutely has to be 100% tall plants. The reason flawlessly explains the assertion. The hidden genetic law is directly calling the shots for the visible outcome.
And that brings us to the indisputable champion, correct option 2. Both A and R are correct, and R is the correct explanation of A. Boom, we verified the facts, we mapped out the direct causal relationship, and we just transformed a seriously confusing multiple choice question into a really elegant demonstration of deductive reasoning. We didn't just guess today, we rigorously proved it.
I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Think about how these invisible rules of dominance might be shaping the visible world all around us. We just saw how a hidden recessive trait can entirely disappear for a whole generation, just completely masked by a dominant one, only to remain hidden in the code. If this invisible biological tug-of-war so strictly governs the height of a simple garden pea plant, just imagine how these exact same dynamics are actively operating in complex human traits, animal behaviors, and the vast ecosystems we interact with every single day. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always keep looking for the hidden rules behind the things you observe.